Chapter 15, Argumentation Papers. This is perhaps the hardest chapter of the book, but it is also one of the most important. For those of you taking additional courses in English, primarily English 112, this will prove very useful to you, so keep these notes. The definition of an argumentative paper is a paper that attempts to strengthen or to change the attitude of the reader, or to persuade the reader to a particular belief through logic. Research papers are good examples of argumentative papers. It should be no surprise to you that a definition paper must have a thesis, order, and details. It's important to note that in order to win an argument in a paper, you do not have to get your readers to convert to your viewpoint. You can win the argument by getting them to understand your perspective and your thesis. It is not necessary to convince readers that you are correct. Arguments use logic, and there are two forms of logic: inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning deals with the future, the unknown, and the unobserved. It looks at a specific characteristic or characteristics of one item and applies what you know about it to the rest of its group. It is the in to out approach. If I ask some of the people in this class whether they are male or female, and they all answer that they are male, I might use inductive reasoning to induce that all of the students in the class are male. In order to prove that I am right or wrong, I would have to go through and ask everyone in the class until I either found that someone was female or until I had asked every person. Deductive reasoning is the opposite of inductive reasoning. Whereas inductive reasoning was the in to out reasoning, deductive reasoning is the out to in reasoning. It is the present, the now observable, and the known. It's the general or broad concept to the narrow or the particular. It's the big picture to the small application. I would use deductive reasoning if I were told that everyone in the class had submitted their discussion board postings for this week, and then deduced that that meant that a certain student, because he or she was in the class, had submitted the assigned work. Deductive reasoning uses syllogisms to reach conclusions. Syllogisms are just arguments that have at least one major and one minor premise, followed by a conclusion. When we consider arguments, we need to ask ourselves whether the argument is sound or not. Soundness deals with two things. The first is knowing whether or not the premises are true. In this case, we can ask ourselves this question: are the premises actual facts? If they are, then the statements or the premises are true. The second question to ask deals with the validity of the conclusion. This is more challenging. The question to ask to determine validity is: if my given statements are true, then the conclusion must be a natural, logical sentence or statement that directly follows from the premises. Truth for our purposes here is what we regularly recognize as truth. Validity, though, deals with the direct feasibility of the statement's tie-in to the premises. An argument can be true but not valid, and it can be valid but not true. If and only if an argument is both true and valid can it be considered sound. One example of a true and valid argument is: this is an English composition class. Students in a composition class learn how to write. Therefore, students will learn how to write in this course. Another example is: today is a typical Thursday. Usually our recycling is picked up on Thursdays. Our recycling will be picked up today. A syllogism that is not sound is the following: English majors read lots of books. Nate reads lots of books. Therefore, Nate is an English major. This argument is not valid and thus not sound because it does not tell you that there are other people who read books besides English majors. The conclusion does not have to be a direct result of the prior statements. Likewise, an argument can be valid but not true. Take for instance the syllogism that says Forsyth Tech is a 4-year university. 4-year universities award bachelor's degrees. Therefore, Forsyth Tech awards bachelor's degrees. The problem here that makes the argument not sound is the part about Forsyth Tech's being a 4-year university. The argument is valid, but it's simply not true because it was built on a false assumptive statement. Remember, in order for an argument to be sound, it must have true premises and a valid conclusion. Now we hit the fallacies. First of these we learned about in cause and effect papers, the post hoc fallacy. Officially, the Latin meaning is, after this, therefore because of this. Remember that just because two events happened in close time to each other, it does not mean that the first one directly caused the second. Just because you ate at Chick-fil-A for lunch and on the way out found a $20 bill in your wallet that you thought you had lost, does not mean that the next time you lose money, you should go eat at Chick-fil-A. The second fallacy is card stacking. Card stacking is making your argument solely one-sided. It is ignoring the counter-argument. Yellow journalism or biased reporting is an example of this. When you present an argument, you must present it fairly from both sides, not relying on the omission of points that contradict you. It's better to mention the opposing side's viewpoint and then explain it away, instead of just ignoring it. The third fallacy listed here is slanting. Slanting is a variation on card stacking. It uses connotations to sway readers instead of facts. Someone who is underweight would prefer to believe that they had a model's figure instead of being referred to as a bag of bones. While you might be tempted to refer to anorexics in a paper as looking like concentration camp survivors, you need to be objective in your language. Even a word like emaciated has certain negative connotations that might sway a reader. Number 4 on our list of fallacies to avoid is hasty generalization. Simply put, this is jumping to conclusions about things in a category based on just a few pieces that were sampled. There is not enough evidence to confirm your assumption. If I only asked 3 people a survey question, and from those 3 people tried to assume that everyone in Winston-Salem was the same, I would have used hasty generalization. One person's hobby is not necessarily everyone's hobby. Overgeneralization is somewhat similar, and I would not ask you to differentiate between hasty generalization and overgeneralization on a test. Particularly with people, it's very hard to make full generalizations no matter the amount of evidence that you have. Each individual is unique. Using words like all and every will get you in trouble. Instead, use terms like often, seem to, or appear to instead. In addition, quoting or paraphrasing from someone else may be a good idea in this case. All HIV and AIDS sufferers did not contract the disease through IV drug use or through homosexual relationships, and it would be important to make sure that you did not fall into overgeneralizing in a category like that. Non sequitur is our 6th fallacy. The Latin translation of this phrase is, "it does not follow." Think about it, no sequence. A student who has not drawn a conclusion is committing this fallacy. One of my favorite examples that a student came up with was this one. My car is old. I need to get new tennis shoes. At first, a reader does not see the tie between an old car and new shoes, though the speaker or the writer really does make sense in his or her own mind. The steps, though, need to be stated. The logical transpirence or a sequence is this. My car is old. Old cars break down. When my car breaks down, I'll have to walk everywhere, and my shoes are old. Therefore, I need to go buy new running shoes so that I'll be prepared. Your book gives another example on page 342. I was a volunteer worker this summer, so now I'm saving to go to medical school. It could be that the reason this person needs to save is because the volunteer work was within a medical field and that interested the student. So he or she decided, based on the volunteer experience, to go into a medical profession. Another option is that the person chose to volunteer over the summer instead of getting paid, and thus now has to find a way to get enough money for his or her medical school, which had always been the intended educational goal. From the first statement, the intermediate thought process steps were not clear. The 7th fallacy on our list is ignoring the question. Many of the fallacies that follow this are examples and categories of this one. Basically, ignoring the question is shifting the focus away from the subject at hand. Ad hominem is just one of these. Here again we have a Latin phrase. This one means against the man. The definition is making an irrelevant attack on a person instead of focusing on the topic that you're discussing. Much of the political mudslinging is an attempt to use ad hominem arguments. In addition, when writing about literature, authors may try to get their audience to forget what the main argument was and to focus on or attack a personal quality of the author. One example of this would be someone's trying to downplay or discredit the fantasy in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland by discussing his shyness as a person. Straw man argument, number 9 on the list, is the act of giving someone beliefs or actions that they do not have and then attacking them for it. Many of the incorrectly filed sexual harassment cases fall into this category. Another example would be the Darrell Hunt case here in Winston. He was accused incorrectly and spent years in jail for a crime that he did not commit. While he was in jail, he was slandered and belittled for his supposed actions, even though he was not the culprit. The same was true of the 1996 Atlanta Olympic Park bombing. Richard Jewell, a security guard who actually found the bomb just before it went off and even helped evacuate the area, was for years accused of being the person who actually placed the bomb. In 2003, Eric Rudolph was arrested in the crime and confessed to it in 2005. Jewell, who should have been heralded as a hero for helping save lives, was instead the victim of the straw man argument by being treated by society as a murderer. The 10th fallacy is begging the question. In this effort, a writer assumes something that instead should be proven. Just as your book points out, the statement that since students learn to write in high school, the college composition course is a waste of time and should be replaced by a more useful and stimulating course is a perfect example. You as a writer would have to prove that all high school students graduate with that knowledge and those skills before you could attempt to show that English 111 needs to be replaced or done away with. On to number 11, shifting the burden of proof. This is making a reader feel like he or she has to do the proving, when the reality is that the person writing or putting forth the idea is the one who has the responsibility of making the argument. You do not want to put your reader on the defense by saying something like, "The war in the Middle East is necessary and you cannot show good reason otherwise." Circular argumentation, or just restating sentences instead of proving them, is the 12th fallacy we're studying. Something like, "I like detective novels because mystery stories give me pleasure," does not tell your readers why you like them. It just tells them again that you do. It's the same as saying, "I like mysteries because I like mysteries." You need to tell your readers what it is about them that makes you like them. This circular reasoning is something that many young children do simply because they do not know how to state things otherwise. "I like cotton candy." Well, why do you like cotton candy? It's good. What makes it good? I like it. The point is, you must give reasons to back up what you are saying, not just restate your sentences. Here we are on our last slide. The either-or fallacy is another attempt at logic and argument that children help point out clearly. It is suggesting that there are only two options when there really are more than that. If I ask my child if he wants a hamburger or a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch, he'll be quick to point out that he'd rather have chicken nuggets, or even a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He's showing me that I did not give him all of the options. A practical or adult example of this fallacy is, "I'm sick today, but I have to finish my paper anyway. If I don't, then I'll fail the class." The truth is that the instructor may give an extension or may only deduct a few points. In addition, it's unlikely that one paper will make or break a grade. Remember cause and effect papers? Almost all events have more than one cause, and likely more than one effect as well. The final fallacy is argument by analogy. We learned way back in Chapter 3 that analogies can be used to support a thesis. The problem comes in when you rely solely on them to prove your point, particularly when you're dealing with history and with people. Very rarely do two episodes turn out the exact same way. There are always some differences among people and events, and drawing finite conclusions based on those is not a surefire way to prove anything. Feel free to use analogies to clarify points, but do not use them as your only method of proving your position.